when I accidentally pressed the call button to dial my boss. My little brother Logan was squeezing himself into a sweater I had just bought him. It was clearly too tight, his arms were flailing, and his head was halfway stuck inside. Seriously? I measured your size before I ordered this. I huffed while trying to help him. It's stuck, he groaned. Be gentle. It hurts. I coaxed him, tugging carefully but firmly. Come on, sweetie, don't be dramatic. Sister's just helping. You sure you can't fit? He gasped dramatically, yanking at the collar, choking his neck. At the time, I had no idea my phone was still in a call. Somewhere across town, in the middle of a high-level board meeting, my boss Ethan Carter's expression was darkening by the second as he listened to what clearly sounded like a very suggestive conversation. He didn't say a word, just turned to the room full of vice presidents and department heads and started dressing them down so viciously that people cried. Meanwhile, Logan pointed at my phone, and my heart dropped. The screen glowed with the active call to Ethan Carter. I scrambled to grab it, but it was too late. The line was already disconnected. A second later, a text came in. Come back to work when you're well. You're not the president's wife. You can't do whatever you want. No punctuation. Just cold, hard words that I could hear in his icy, condescending voice. My soul left my body. He definitely thought I was faking being sick and wasting company time with whatever nonsense he thought was going on. Got it, I texted back with record speed. Then added, Mr. Carter, I'll report back to work tomorrow. He was typing, then stopped. I could imagine him furiously typing insults and deleting them one after another. The Ethan I knew never hesitated to scold people, and I'd worked by his side for 4 straight years. No vacation, no personal leave, nothing. This one sick leave was my first. The next morning, as soon as I walked in, Rachel Sloanaka's sister Wu, the in-office gossip central, hurried over and whispered, Careful today. He's in a mood. Blew up in the meeting yesterday. I mean, nuclear-level meltdown. I made myself coffee, took a deep breath, and knocked on Ethan's door. Good morning, Mr. Carter. Here's today's schedule. 2 internal meetings and a dinner with the Blake group this evening. He didn't touch the coffee I made. His fingers casually rested on the desk, but his tone was ice. Let the new hire, Vanessa, take my place at the dinner tonight. You're not needed. Understood, Mr. Carter, I replied, swallowing a dozen questions. I turned and left, not daring to ask what I had clearly done to deserve this cold shoulder. He hated when people questioned his orders, and I had already crossed the line once this week. I walked over to Vanessa Blake, who'd only been on the team a few days, and calmly passed along the assignment. She nearly jumped out of her seat. Wait, really? Me? Are you sure, Claire? She squealed, tearing up with excitement. I'm sorry, I'm just wow. I didn't expect this so soon. Rachel swooped in like a hawk. Look at our little Vanessa. Barely here a week, and already replacing her mentor. Impressive. No way. Vanessa laughed with a bright blush. Claire is irreplaceable. I still have so much to learn from her. Besides, Mr. Carter is just so gentle. I'm still getting used to him. I turned my head just in time to exchange an awkward glance with Rachel. Vanessa had no idea that Ethan Carter was more volcano than snowflake, and his gentleness was like a rare solar eclipse seen by very few and never twice. The truth? I recruited Vanessa a month ago, before my surgery was scheduled. Rachel offered to cover for me, but I declined. I needed to do this myself. Because deep down, I wasn't just preparing for medical leave, I was preparing for an exit strategy. 4 years ago, fresh out of college, I joined Ethan's startup when he'd just left Carter Enterprises to build his own empire. Back then, he was a charming, sharp visionary. 4 years later, he's become the reigning king of the industry, and I'm just a shadow. Sure, everyone in the office calls me Sister Claire, but that respect rides entirely on my position beside him. Deep down, I've always known I was expendable. Rumor had it he hired me in the first place because I looked vaguely like someone he once loved, a woman named Sophia Collins who left for Europe and never looked back. I used to laugh off the gossip until Vanessa showed up. That first day she walked in, Ethan looked up from his laptop and froze for a second. I'd never seen him react like that. And in that moment, I realized she looked more like Sophia than I ever had. The rumors were true. That night, I stared at an old photo saved in my phone, one I wasn't supposed to have. A year ago, the janitor handed me a wrinkled photo she'd found in the trash. Secretary Bennett, Mr. Carter threw this out. I thought maybe it was a mistake. I'd meant to return it, but curiosity got the best of me. I took a quick photo of it. Young Ethan looked about 17, smiling gently beside a pretty, sweet-faced girl, clearly Sophia. They looked perfect together. I returned the original to his desk, pretending I didn't recognize it.
Here, Mr. Carter.
This was found in the trash. I wasn't sure if he looked at it, paused mid-reach, then pulled back. Throw it away, he said flatly. She's married now. My heart twisted. I should have stayed out of it. Want me to shred it?
I asked. No.
Just give it here, he sighed, reaching for it again. Our fingers brushed for a second. I flinched, pulled back. Sorry, Mr. Carter. That tiny touch still haunted me like a secret I never asked for. Later that day, after briefing Vanessa on the dinner protocol, Rachel cornered me in the break room. While you were gone, she strutted around in backless dresses cut down to her belly button. I'm not saying she's trying to seduce him, but she's definitely not trying. I stirred my coffee slowly, trying to calm myself. Before clocking out, I placed a bottle of milk on Ethan's desk like always. He leaned back, legs up, sharp profile haloed by the office lights. I've briefed Vanessa on the dinner, I said quietly. And don't forget to drink the milk before any alcohol. He looked at the bottle, then at me. You've lost weight. Then he added, am I not paying you enough? I froze. Rachel must have already told him I planned to resign. Office gossip traveled faster than light. Mr. Carter, I plan to tell you once Vanessa settled in. Thank you for everything these past years. He frowned like I was quoting numbers in a failed deal. How much are they offering you? It's not about money, I said softly. Then what is it? He asked. Is it about Vanessa taking your dinner meeting? Or are you still sick? If you're upset, you can tell me. I can handle it. There was something unexpectedly gentle in his tone. A golden ray of sunset hit his jawline, casting shadows across his sharp features. He loosened his tie, popped a couple buttons on his shirt. I looked away immediately. In public, he was always meticulous, no room for imagination. If you're upset about Vanessa, I get it, he continued. But it's not like that. It's not, I interrupted. She's smart. She's perfect for the role. He adjusted his sleeves, stood, and popped another button. I swallowed hard. It's getting warm, I muttered, fanning myself. Spring weather's weird. Cold yesterday, blazing today. I cleared my throat. Anyway, there's no rush. We'll talk again later. Just wanted to make sure your driver knows to take you home if you drink. He leaned forward, eyes narrowing. It's fine. Vanessa can take care of me. She can even stay over if she wants. I'm a big boy. His voice was calm, but the faint blush climbing up his neck betrayed him. Was he jealous? My stomach twisted. I forced a smile. Mr. Carter, size isn't everything. But young people do work harder. Wouldn't you agree? He looked stunned. It was the same line I'd jokingly said to Logan earlier. Before I could die of embarrassment, my phone rang. I rushed outside to answer. Logan? You're where? Outside my building. I sprinted downstairs. He was leaning against a sleek black Bugatti, sunglasses on, smirking like a movie star. Claire. Your brother's hot, someone whispered behind me.
Great.
I was never going to live this down. Logan blew kisses at passing women. What are you doing? I hissed. Acting like a clown? Didn't you say a creep was stalking you? He said. And didn't you use a pic of me and claim I was your boyfriend? I'm here to sell the act. I laughed, half annoyed, half touched. Where'd you get the car? Borrowed it. Don't worry. It's covered. He tossed an arm around my shoulder. I'll walk you to your car. No one messes with my big sister. As we walked, I realized he'd grown so much taller than me. It had been 4 years. "Mom's anniversary is coming up," he said. "Can you go with me? I can't leave work, but I'll send flowers." He sighed. "Okay. Just don't forget." Suddenly, I froze. Ethan's Maybach passed slowly in front of us. Vanessa was in the passenger seat, beaming like she'd won a prize. Ethan was driving himself. I bit my lip and didn't look away. The second I got home, I texted the headhunter, who always messaged me like clockwork every month. "I'm ready." Then I ordered beer and fried chicken and tried to drown the ache in my chest. The wall clock kept ticking, mocking me with how slowly time could pass when you were trying not to think about someone, especially someone like Ethan Carter, who always knew how to push every single one of my buttons without lifting a finger, and just when I thought I could finally relax and emotionally detach for a night, I got woken up around midnight by a random call, and when I picked it up, there was nothing but heavy, ragged breathing on the other end, like the person was seconds away from either dying or doing something illegal, and for a second, I thought maybe I had but dialed someone again, the way I had accidentally called Ethan earlier during Logan's sweater disaster, but then I saw it was just a blank number, and the screen went dark again before I could say anything, and honestly, I chalked it up to the universe messing with me, because that's what it had been doing lately. First the surgery, then the replacement, now the haunting calls, and I couldn't help but remember. A year ago, when my phone screen had cracked so badly, it looked like a roadmap of the East African Rift, and Ethan had handed me a new phone with a look of pure disdain on his face and said, "Everyone knows you work for me. Don't make me look bad," before tossing me a phone identical to his, and back then, I had foolishly clutched it like a precious gift and obsessed over the words, "You work for me," wondering if he meant more by them, if he saw me as more than just a secretary who happened to match his ex's bone structure, and I worked my ass off after that, even turned down job offers with salaries that would have doubled mine, just to stay a little longer beside him, because when you're in love with someone who doesn't love you back, you bargain with time. You take crumbs and pretend they're whole meals, until the day he paused flipping through a project book and told me to hire a backup in case I needed extended sick leave. And the chill that went through me that day didn't come from my fever, but from the realization that in his eyes, I was already halfway gone, already a ghost, already replaced. And that was the moment the air inside me deflated, and the woman who used to beam with pride beside him got knocked off her pedestal and ended up in a hospital bed, alone, except for Logan, who showed up out of nowhere after 4 years, red-eyed and exhausted, whispering that he'd thought I didn't want him anymore because I said I couldn't pick him up after his release and told him to go home alone, and I could barely speak because the guilt was too much, and his words were like someone pressing into a bruise I'd hidden deep in my chest. Logan, the same kid who refused to see me every time I visited juvenile detention, now curled beside me like when we were little, and I realized I couldn't afford to stay stagnant. I couldn't afford to be a replaceable secretary to a man who didn't see my worth. I had to rise again, to be someone strong enough to protect my brother and myself, no matter how much I didn't want to leave Ethan. So the next morning when I walked into Carter Enterprises, I did it with my head high, despite the strange glances, despite the fake smiles and the whispers. And the first thing that hit me was how Vanessa was glowing with that freshly promoted energy, dancing around the office like she owned the place, and even when she saw me, she just smiled and said, "Oh, Claire, you're back? I thought you'd take a few more days. You must be feeling much better," with that falsely sweet tone that made me want to roll my eyes into another timeline, and when I ignored her and headed to my desk, Rachel popped up from the side and whispered, "Don't let her get to you. Word is, she's been playing Tai Chi with every executive in the office and probably doing yoga with Ethan's attention too," and I didn't even respond. Just sipped my coffee and opened my laptop like I wasn't boiling inside. And of course, Ethan chose that exact moment to walk out of his office, and the energy in the room shifted like someone had flipped the thermostat from cool to frigid. And even though I kept my eyes on the window, I felt him pause, then say, "Claire, can you step into my office for a moment?" And just like that, I was back in that familiar territory of conflicting heartbeats and emotional landmines, because that was Ethan's signature move: pull you in just when you think you've managed to escape his orbit. And inside his office, he was still unreadable, tapping a thick file against his palm before slamming it down on the table and saying, You know Carter Enterprises is my territory. Why would you? And then he cut himself off, clearly trying to maintain control, but his voice was laced with anger and something dangerously close to hurt, and I answered calmly, Mr. Carter, your company pays well and has a great reputation. I simply made the logical decision any employee would make. We all want to work where we're appreciated. And he scoffed. You're just like the others, huh? After all these years, no difference. And I stood my ground, because if I faltered now, I'd lose all self-respect. So I said, like you prepared to replace me the moment I got sick? That backup wasn't just for coverage. It was a reminder that I'm dispensable, and the second the words left my mouth, I regretted it. Not because they weren't true, but because I saw the flicker of pain in his eyes, quickly hidden behind that familiar cold facade, and I braced myself for a verbal bullet, a complete character assassination, but instead, he surprised May's voice dropped, his gaze softened, and he said, Are you angry because I arranged a replacement? Claire, I didn't mean to make you feel unwanted. And he exhaled hard, running a hand through his hair like he couldn't believe he was actually explaining himself, and that was the first time I saw Ethan not as a CEO, not as the man who terrified executives into obedience, but as a flawed, complicated human being trying to navigate emotions he clearly didn't understand, and my own walls started to crumble because I wasn't used to this version of him, and it felt like seeing a ghost off the Ethan who might have loved me if things had been different, and suddenly my voice shook as I whispered. I was upset. But that was my issue to handle, not yours. And just like that, he stepped closer, brushed a tear off my cheek with his thumb, and his other hand caught my wrist gently, his palm warm against my skin, and we both froze, the atmosphere turning so intimate it felt illegal, and I knew I should step back, should shut it down. But his eyes searched mine like he was looking for something he lost years ago, and then, before either of us could overthink it, he leaned in and kissed Menet softly, not politely, but like a man who had been starving for years and finally found water, and I was stupid enough to kiss him back for 3 seconds before I remembered who I was, what this was, and I pushed him away with every ounce of dignity I had left and snapped, Mr. Carter, please respect yourself. I have a boyfriend, which wasn't technically true, but I wasn't about to let him know that, and I rushed to the bathroom to splash cold water on my face and breathe, because my heart was beating like I'd just run a marathon, and I barely noticed Vanessa walking in behind me until she handed me a makeup bag and said, You didn't look well when you walked out. Want to borrow mine? And I stared at her in the mirror, her lipstick slightly smeared, and she leaned her chin on my shoulder like we were best friends and purred. Did Ethan tell you he and I are getting engaged? He didn't want to announce it yet, but I figured you should know. He said you'd take good care of me, that I'd be in good hands. He arranged my interview, you know. My dad told me never to be selfish again because my sister broke Ethan's heart years ago. So now I have to fix it. Please don't tell anyone yet. He'd be mad if I made it public. Her voice was gentle, but every word was a dagger, and I smiled, pushed her bag back, and said, Congrats. Don't worry, I don't borrow other people's things, then walked out with my head high, even though inside, I was crumbling, because her words confirmed everything I had tried to deny. Ethan was engaged. Vanessa was the new Sophia, and I was no one. I barely made it back to my desk before my phone buzzed again, this time with a message from Ethan. There's a cocktail party tonight. Be ready to attend with me. And just like that, my already fragile mood spiraled even further, because since when did Ethan Carter ever take a female companion to these events, let alone me, the assistant he apparently could replace in a blink with a younger, shinier version of his first love? I sat there staring at the message like it had teeth, trying to figure out his angle, because after kissing me one moment, then letting Vanessa drop that engagement bombshell the next, now he wanted to bring me to an event that was normally reserved for board members and power players? No way, it was just work. There had to be a reason, some corporate agenda I couldn't see. Maybe an image to maintain or a narrative to control, but either way, I wasn't in the mood to play supporting character in someone else's love triangle, not when I was already barely keeping it together. So I shoved my emotions into a drawer and focused on the task at hand, getting ready, showing up, doing my job, because if there was one thing I was still good at, it was pretending to be fine in a room full of people who didn't know how badly I was breaking. 10 minutes before we left, I knocked on Ethan's office door, placed his warm milk down like I always did, and said, "Mr. Carter, we'll head out shortly." And instead of the usual nod or grunt, he looked up at me with this expression I couldn't read and said, "Claire, I have something to confess. I already know who Vanessa really is." I blinked, caught off guard by his tone measured, almost apologetic, and I quickly replied, "Don't worry, Mr.
Carter.
I'm not interested. I won't say anything," trying to protect whatever privacy he thought he needed. But he shook his head, frustrated. "I didn't lie to you on purpose. I was afraid you'd think I was keeping secrets again, afraid you'd think I was choosing her over you." And the way he said again made something in my chest twist because it meant he remembered all the times he'd hurt me before and was still haunted by them. "It's fine," I said quickly. "As long as you're happy." He looked like he wanted to say something else, but I turned and left before he could. The car ride to the party was silent, tense, full of unsaid words thick enough to choke on, and I kept my eyes glued to the passing city lights, pretending I didn't feel his gaze flick to me every few minutes. When we arrived, the moment I stepped out of the car, I noticed another vehicle parked nearby, a sleek black Bugatti, the same one Logan had borrowed to pick me up at work the other day. My stomach dropped. And right on cue, Vanessa stepped out, heels clicking, looking radiant and innocent, like she didn't just ambush me in a bathroom to announce her engagement. She immediately ran over. "Ethan, why did you bring Claire?" "I thought we agreed," he cut her off, coolly saying. "She's part of the team. It's business." Then she turned to me, flashing a sugary smile. "Oh, by the way, remember how you asked who drove Dad's car that day? Surprise. It was your brother. What a coincidence, huh? Logan's working for my family now as our driver. Small world." I froze, blood draining from my face as Logan walked over awkwardly, clearly aware of the tension. "Say hi, Logan," Vanessa said brightly. "This is Mr. Carter, your sister's boss." "Oh, and Claire, don't worry, Dad is super easygoing. He loves helping people who work hard." Logan bowed stiffly. "Nice to meet you, sir." Ethan glanced between us, smirking slightly. "So, this is the boyfriend you mentioned before?" I opened my mouth to respond, but Vanessa giggled and tugged Logan toward the door. "Come on, it's just a party. Don't be shy." I saw Logan look back at me, clearly unsure, but I didn't stop him. This wasn't a fight I wanted to have on a marble staircase in front of a crowd. Inside the ballroom, the scene was glittering and polished, the kind of place where champagne flowed like water and fake smiles were currency. Ethan made his rounds with ease, exchanging pleasantries with CEOs and politicians while I hovered by the edge like an afterthought, until he suddenly gestured for me to step forward. "Everyone, this is Claire Bennett. Please look after her when she joins Carter Enterprises permanently." My head snapped toward him.
What?
I hadn't agreed to stay. But everyone was already smiling and nodding, treating me like some prized recruit. That's when it hit me. Ethan wasn't just protecting Mayhay, was staking a public claim, making it known that I had his backing. He was telling the wolves in suits to back off. And just like that, the ice around my heart cracked a little. I blinked back sudden tears and raised my glass. One toast became 3, then 5, and soon the alcohol warmed me enough to approach Ethan and blurt out, "I'm sorry. I should have told you I wanted to leave. I thought you didn't care. I didn't know you'd do all this." He didn't respond right away. He just stared at me for a long moment before saying, "Claire, how could I ever hate you? You're so much more than you think you are." My lips parted to respond, but before I could speak, a loud crash shattered the moment. Screams echoed across the ballroom, followed by angry shouting. I ran toward the noise, pushing through the crowd, and there on his knees in the center of the chaos was Logan. Blood was pooling near the edge of the stage, and an older man was crumpled nearby, moaning. "It's him. That's the boy who murdered his father," someone shouted. My heart stopped. I rushed to Logan, pulling him up, but he looked at me with glassy eyes and whispered, "Don't. Just go. Don't get involved." People were filming. Faces I didn't know, eyes filled with judgment. Then a cold voice sliced through the air. "Apologize." Ethan had stepped into the circle, his expression thunderous. "Apologize to her." The woman who'd been screaming flinched. "Why should I? Because I said so," Ethan said, deadly calm. "Unless you want to find out how quickly I can ruin your career." She paled. Tu didn't know he was her brother. Vanessa appeared from nowhere, inserting herself between us like a shield. "Don't fight. She's my friend. It was all just a misunderstanding. Sister Claire, please don't take it personally, okay?" But Logan looked at me one last time, his face full of quiet pain, then pulled his hand away and bolted toward the exit. I chased after him, heels scraping the marble, but he was gone before I made it outside. The gossip hit full speed before the doors even shut. Everyone remembered the headlines from 4 years ago, a 15-year-old boy who'd killed his abusive, alcoholic father in defense of his mother. No one cared about the context, only the scandal. I stood there, frozen, dizzy, until everything went dark. When I opened my eyes, I was in a hospital room with a saline drip in my arm and Ethan sitting beside me, looking more exhausted than I'd ever seen him. "Logan's okay," he said before I could ask. "Someone found him and took him home." I exhaled in relief, but he immediately launched into a lecture. "You're severely anemic, hypoglycemic, underweight. Do you even eat?" I forced a tired smile. "You care too much, Mr.
Carter."
You'll make it hard for me to quit." His eyes flicked to mine. "Then don't quit. And if I break my word to Carter Enterprises, no other company will hire me." "What then?" I teased, half serious. Before he could answer, the door burst open. Vanessa stood there holding a thermos. "Sister Claire, I brought soup. Hospital food is terrible." She looked around like she owned the place. "Also, I convinced my friend to come and apologize to you and Logan. Isn't that sweet?" I stared at her, not sure what to say. Ethan was frozen. I knew the woman she mentioned was the one who'd screamed at Logan earlier. And while I appreciated the gesture, I also knew the cost public relations nightmares, backroom deals, and favors owed. I shook my head. Logan made a mistake, yes. But don't blame others for being scared. I don't want to talk about it anymore. Vanessa smiled like she'd won something. "You're so understanding, Sister Claire. Ethan promised to have dinner with me tonight. He'll make time, right?" She batted her lashes at Ethan, who just stood up and walked out without a word. After she left, Logan came to visit. He was quiet, solemn, his usual sarcastic edge gone. "I'm sorry," he said, "for making things harder." I hugged him tightly. "You didn't do anything wrong. Let's just forget it all, okay?" He pulled back, suddenly curious. "By the way, do you like Mr. Carter? Because I think he likes you." I choked on my water.
"What?"
"Don't be ridiculous." "I'm serious," he insisted. "He looks at you like you're the moon or something." I shook my head, swallowing down the truth. "Even if I did, he's engaged. And his fiancée is your boss's daughter. That kind of power, that kind of world, we don't belong in it. We need to focus on building our own lives, okay?" He nodded, reluctantly. I closed my eyes, chest tight. Loving someone who was never truly yours felt like biting into a plum so sour you had no choice but to swallow, even if it made you cry. When I woke up the next morning, Logan was gone, and his phone had been shut off for hours. No message, no location, just silence, the kind of silence that eats at your ribs and makes your skin crawl because something in your gut tells you it's not just a moody walk around the block or a night out blowing off steam. It's something darker, heavier, dangerous. And I didn't care that I was still hooked up to N4 or that my head was spinning. I yanked the needle out, threw on my coat, and bolted out of the hospital like a woman possessed, because deep down I knew where he'd go. Or at least I had to hope I knew, and I wasn't about to waste another second gambling with his safety, not when I'd already failed him so many times before. So when I reached the front gate of the Blake estate, I wasn't surprised to see Ethan and his security team already walking out, his expression stony, his jaw clenched. And I didn't have time to explain or breathe. I just grabbed his arm and said, "It's Logan." I think he took Vanessa's dad, and for the first time in our entire history, Ethan didn't ask for proof or facts or explanation. She just nodded once, pulled out his phone, and started barking orders, and everything started moving like a war plan in motion. And that's when Vanessa came running out behind us, tear-streaked and trembling, yelling, "It's true, he took my dad. He's crazy, said he'd kill him." And before anyone could restrain her, she ran up and slapped me across the face so hard I saw white, screaming, "You're still protecting him? The sister of a murderer can't possibly be a good person." And I barely processed the sting before Ethan's arm snapped out to block her next move, stepping in front of me like a wall, his voice low and terrifying. "That's enough." But Vanessa wasn't done. Oh no, her eyes were wild and red as she hissed, "You're really going to pick her over me? After everything? She ruined our engagement. She humiliated me in front of everyone, and now her brother kidnapped my father. You can't still be pretending this is nothing, Ethan." But Ethan looked at her like she was a stranger, not the daughter of his family's business partner or the girl he supposedly promised to marry, and his voice was calm, final, sharp like glass. "I never agreed to be engaged to you. That was between our parents. Your sister made the right choice walking away. I wish you would too." And you could have heard a pin drop as Vanessa's mouth fell open and Ethan turned to me, wrapping a protective arm around my shoulder and muttering, "Let's go." And it wasn't until we were in the car that I realized how badly my hands were shaking, how cold my skin felt, and how fast my heart was beating, not from fear but from shock, because Ethan Carter, the man who never stepped into messes unless there was a contract attached, just chose me, in public, over the golden daughter of the Blake family. And while I was still processing that, he pulled out his phone again and tapped a voice memo, then hit play, and there it was, Logan's voice from the night before, recorded and sent before he vanished, talking to me in the hospital, saying things like, "I'll be useful, I promise, and I just want to protect you." And at the end, his voice cracked with something so raw and childlike it made my throat tighten. "I know. You like Ethan. And I think he likes you too. That's why I'm doing this. I won't let anyone use you again." My eyes stung with tears. I didn't have time to cry, and Ethan reached over and grabbed my hand, his palm warm and steady as he said, "Where would he go? Think." And suddenly I knew. I closed my eyes and let myself remember the only place we ever felt safe, when we were kids, in the edge of Willow Lake, up in the mountains, where our mom used to take us when things at home got unbearable, where she once told us, "When I die, I want to be buried here, far away from everything bad." And I whispered, "The lake." That's where he'd go, and Ethan didn't hesitate. He told the driver to step on it, and the city blurred behind us as the roads twisted into forest and memory, and the further we went, the heavier my chest felt, because what if we were too late? What if this place I thought of as a refuge was where everything finally shattered? And as we turned the last bend, I saw a black Bugatti parked crookedly near the gravel path. The same car Logan had driven before, and I took off running before the car even stopped, branches scratching my legs, wind slashing my face, until I saw them, Vanessa's father on his knees, hands clasped in prayer, forehead bleeding from where he'd been forced to bow to our mother's grave, and standing beside him, barely breathing, was Logan, clutching a knife with trembling hands, his face pale and soaked in sweat, and I screamed his name so loud it echoed through the trees. "Logan, please don't do this." And he turned, eyes wide, broken, and whispered, "I just wanted him to say sorry to Mom, just once." And Ethan stepped in front of me slowly, carefully, his hands raised. "Logan, it's okay. You did good. You can stop now. Let me take it from here." And Logan shook his head like a frightened child, tears spilling down his cheeks. He never said sorry, not once. He did everything to her and acted like it was nothing. Mom deserved better. And Ethan nodded, stepping closer inch by inch.
"She did. And you did your best.
Let me take you both home, okay?" And for a moment, it looked like Logan might actually drop the knife. But then he looked at me, smiled that same little boy smile I hadn't seen in years, and whispered, "But it's not enough," and raised the blade toward his own chest. And I screamed, lunging forward. But Ethan was faster, slamming into him and grabbing the knife with his bare hand. The blade slicing deep into his palm as blood splattered across Logan's shirt, and the world became sirens and chaos as security tackled Vanessa's dad and paramedics rushed in, and all I could do was hold Logan's face in my hands and sob, "You're not a killer. You never were." And he blinked slowly, whispering, "I'm sorry, sis," before slipping into unconsciousness, and Ethan's hand was dripping blood as he pulled me up and muttered, "He'll be okay. He has to be." And I couldn't even answer because my voice was gone, eaten by fear and relief and exhaustion, and the next few hours were a blur. ICU monitors, police statements, reporters gathering like vultures. But through it all, Ethan stayed, never once leaving my side, not even when the doctor finally came out and said Logan was stable and sleeping, and I almost collapsed from relief, and Ethan didn't say a word, just pulled me into his chest and let me sob like a child, and in that moment, I didn't care about power or money or who loved who first. I only cared that someone was holding me like I wasn't alone anymore. And 2 days later, when Logan finally woke up, the first thing I told him was the good news. Vanessa's father had a serious concussion and psychological trauma from the incident, and now he wandered his estate mumbling about being haunted by little ghosts, which, honestly, felt like the most poetic justice I'd ever seen. And while the Jung family crumbled publicly, Ethan remained eerily quiet, letting the chaos unfold as if it had nothing to do with him, and I realized that for a man who always fought his battles in the boardroom, this was his way of avenging me, slow, silent, and devastating. And when he finally returned to my apartment that evening, handing me a paper bag with a change of clothes, I laughed through my tears because inside was the same sweater I'd bought for Logan, the one that was too tight because of his giant head, and I teased, "Big-headed ghost," under my breath, just like Mom used to, and Ethan smiled quietly, his fingers brushing my cheek as he said, "I'm big too," and I rolled my eyes, touching his forehead with my palm. Pretty average size if you ask me, but then I noticed the way he was looking at Messoft, intense, and too much in. I turned away quickly, cheeks burning, pretending not to notice how close we'd gotten or how my heart was reacting like it was in a rom-com climax, and by the time I returned to Carter Enterprises for work, Rachel had been officially promoted to secretary, and she texted me every 3 minutes panicking over Ethan's absence. "Where is he? He's never late." And just as I typed out a sarcastic reply, a shadow fell over my desk, and a hand snatched my phone away, and then Ethan leaned down, his lips brushing my ear, and whispered, "Dear girlfriend, I just stopped by the courthouse to change your last name. That's why I'm late." And I choked, spinning around to glare at him as he pointed at the plaque on his office door and said, "First order of business, remove President Carter. Second order, replace it with Claire Bennett's boyfriend. Third order," he grabbed my wrist and pulled me into his office, locking the door behind us, "is personal." And I barely had time to catch my breath before he backed me against the wall and murmured, "Don't you have something to ask me? Like, have I ever made weird phone calls at night?" His breath hot against my skin. Or why I would ever throw away a photo without burning it first, and I gasped, fists pushing at his chest, "You are so childish," and he grinned. "I'm not childish. I'm just big." And before I could snap back, his lips crashed into mine, warm, possessive, familiar, and I knew, in that moment, that no matter how chaotic our story had been, it had always been leading here to him, to us, to finally choosing each other for real. If someone had told me 6 months ago that Ethan Carter, the man who once fired a regional director for using the wrong font in a slide deck, would end up holding my hand like it was a lifeline, kissing me in his office like the world outside had stopped, and smiling like I was his entire universe, I would have laughed and rolled my eyes because that Ethan had always been untouchable, robotic, buried in contracts and logic and strategic takeovers, and I was just the efficient assistant who knew how. He liked his coffee, memorized his schedule, and kept her feelings filed away like unread emails in a spam folder. But now, here we were, tangled in a moment I hadn't dared to dream about for years, and the second his lips left mine, he rested his forehead against mine and whispered, "Claire, if you try to run again, I'll chase you this time." And I didn't respond with words, just curled my fingers around his collar and nodded, because some things don't need verbal confirmation when your entire soul is already screaming yes. And after that moment, Something changed between us in it in a loud, dramatic, soap opera way, but in the quiet things, like how he started walking me to my car after work instead of just texting good night, or how he stopped referring to me by my last name in front of others and instead said Claire, with this softness that made even Rachel raise an eyebrow. And when Logan came home from the hospital, Ethan personally drove us to the apartment and helped carry in groceries like it was the most natural thing in the world, like we'd been doing this for years. And Logan, still healing, still raw, eyed him warily at first, but then one night I caught the two of them watching football together and fake arguing about stats like brothers, and I nearly cried because I realized I didn't have to choose between the people I loved anymore, that somehow, impossibly, the world was stitching itself back together. And it wasn't just Ethan who chong at it, was me too. Because I stopped trying to be replaceable, stopped shrinking myself to fit in his shadow, and started standing up straighter, speaking up more. Especially when I learned that Vanessa's little PR stunt had almost tanked an entire acquisition Carter Enterprises had been planning for months, and Ethan, in full CEO mode, had shut it down so ruthlessly the board barely blinked before replacing Blake Group with another partner. And Vanessa, stripped of power and reputation, vanished from the company. Quietly, her name now only whispered in breakroom gossip as the girl who mistook ambition for affection, and though part of me felt sorry for her, a bigger part of me knew she had made her choices, and so had I, and mine finally felt right. And a week later, as I was cleaning out old documents at home, I found an unopened envelope addressed to me in my mom's handwriting, dated just weeks before she died. And I sat down on the floor and read it through blurry eyes, her voice echoing through the lines like she was right beside me, saying how proud she was of Logan and me, how sorry she was for not being able to protect us better, but that she believed we would find the kind of love that healed more than it hurt. And by the time I finished, Ethan walked in with takeout in one hand and flowers in the other, and when he saw me crying, he didn't ask questions, just set everything down and pulled me into his arms, kissing my temple and murmuring, "You're safe now, Claire. It's okay to let go." And I did, sobbing into his shirt until there was nothing left but gratitude and warmth. And in the following weeks, Logan got stronger, started working part-time for a tech firm that Ethan personally vetted, and every evening he'd come home with stories, sometimes funny, sometimes frustrating, but always with this spark in his eyes that hadn't been there in years. And he even started teasing me again, especially when Ethan came over for dinner, which was now basically every night, because apparently, once a control-freak CEO falls in love, he also forgets what personal space means. And one night, as we were cleaning up, Logan looked at me, totally serious, and asked, "So when are you going to marry him?" And I nearly choked on a rice grain while Ethan, who had just returned from throwing out the trash, walked in, raised an eyebrow, and smirked like he was waiting for my answer too. And I swatted Logan with a dish towel and shouted, "Eat your dinner and stay out of adult conversations." But that night, as Ethan and I sat on the couch watching a documentary I wasn't even pretending to follow, he suddenly turned to me and said, "I know I've made a lot of mistakes, Claire. I know I took too long to figure out what was right in front of me. But if you ever give me the chance to put a ring on your finger, I promise I'll never waste a single day of your life again." And it wasn't a proposal, not really, but it was the most honest, vulnerable thing he'd ever said to me. And I looked at him, at the man I'd once only admired from a distance, and I realized I didn't have to wait for the perfect moment, the perfect ring, or the perfect setting. Because love isn't about dramatic declarations or flash mobs or diamond sizes. It's about choosing each other every messy day, every hard moment, every quiet evening on a beat-up couch. And I leaned in, kissed him softly, and whispered, "Then you better be ready to mean it, Ethan Carter, because when I say yes, I'm not going anywhere." And the way he looked at me then, like I was both his peace and his chaos, was the kind of look that writes itself into your bones. And a few days later, as I walked into Carter Enterprises to submit the final restructure plan that would change the way we ran operations, Rachel passed me in the hallway, wiggling her eyebrows and asking if the rumors about the CEO's girlfriend-turned-secret weapon were true, and I just smiled and said, "Maybe. You'll find out soon enough." Because for the first time in forever, I wasn't hiding or apologizing for who I was. I was stepping forward, shoulder to shoulder with the man I loved, and I had no idea what part 6 of my life would bring, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't a shadow anymore. I was finally standing in the light. It started on a rainy Tuesday, the kind of gray-skied, coffee-fueled morning that usually meant deadlines and board meetings, but instead of rushing to prep Ethan's files like I used to, I stood by the window of our new office, the one we now shared, watching raindrops race down the glass, while sipping the almond milk latte he'd learned to order exactly the way I liked it, because apparently when Ethan Carter falls in love, he doesn't just memorize your coffee order, he learns your favorite pasta, your least favorite sock texture, and the exact temperature you like the AC set at when you're working late. And some days it still didn't feel real, that after all the chaos, heartbreak, and misunderstandings, we were actually here, together, building something not just in business but in life. And the best part was that it didn't feel like I had to sacrifice myself to be by his side anymore. I was no longer the backup plan, the look-alike, or the efficient assistant with a crush. I was Claire Bennett, co-lead of Carter Bennett Ventures, partner in both titles and timelines, and as corny as it sounds, the first time I saw my name on our joint letterhead, I cried in the bathroom for 5 full minutes, because somewhere in between midnight breakdowns, court papers, ICU visits, and career sabotage, I'd stopped believing this version of life could ever belong to someone like me. But Ethan, for all his emotionally constipated, spreadsheet-loving flaws, had made damn sure I knew otherwise. Every single day, and it wasn't just romantic either, because Logan was thriving too, and that mattered more to me than anything. Started mentoring teens at a local youth shelter, using his past not as a weapon but as a shield for others. And one afternoon, I saw him crouch down beside a kid who reminded me so much of him it made my chest ache. And when the boy asked if he'd ever be normal again, Logan said, "There's no normal, just better choices." And I knew then that all the pain we went through had turned into purpose. And even though we still had hard days, they didn't define us anymore. They reminded us how far we'd come. And Ethan, who once couldn't express a single soft emotion without buffering like a broken Wi-Fi signal, now texted me ridiculous things like, "Wear a coat, it's 62 degrees and windy," and "I found your sock under the bed, it misses you," which honestly should have been annoying but somehow always made me laugh. And when he proposed, it wasn't at some rooftop dinner or 5-star event. It was in the middle of doing dishes, my hair in a messy bun, wearing one of his oversized shirts and yelling at him for using the wrong sponge for nonstick pans. And he just looked at me, sud still on his hands, and said, "Marry me, Claire," like he couldn't hold it in anymore. And I blinked at him like he'd lost his mind, because what kind of CO proposes with dish soap on his face? But then again, what kind of girl accepts it with a sponge in one hand and tears in her eyes? And yet I said yes, of course I did, because real love isn't always candlelight and roses. Sometimes it's teamwork in a messy kitchen and a ring box next to a drying rack. And the wedding wasn't extravagant either, just close friends, a lakeside venue near Willow Lake where Mom was buried, Logan standing proudly beside me as I walked down the aisle, and Rachel crying louder than anyone else, muttering something about finally getting a damn happy ending. And as Ethan read his vows, his voice cracking slightly when he mentioned how I'd never once asked him for anything, not even when I deserved the world, I realized that love doesn't always come wrapped in perfect timing or clear intentions. It sneaks in through years of loyalty, quiet acts of care, shared glances, intense boardrooms, and milk bottles left on desks at 7 p.m. And when we kissed, it wasn't just the end of a ceremony, it was the end of pretending, the end of waiting, the end of being afraid to want something more. And after the honeymoon, yes, there was a beach. Yes, I wore 3 swimsuits in a single day just because I could. Life didn't magically become perfect, but it became ours. And one morning, a few months later, I walked into the living room to find Ethan sitting with Logan, a board game between them, 2 cups of coffee steaming, and he looked up and said, "We saved you the good dice." Like this was just another normal morning in our beautifully abnormal little family. And I realized I didn't want a fairy tale. I wanted exactly this messy, real, perfectly flawed life. And as I sat down beside them and took Ethan's hand, his thumb tracing gentle circles on my skin, I smiled, because for once, I didn't feel like the girl trying to keep up with everyone else. I felt like the woman they were lucky to have, and I wasn't afraid anymore, not of love, not of the past, not even of the unknown, because I had them, and they had me, and that was more than enough.